Hello once again, this is Ben with you, Studio on the Lake. Today we're going to carve a wooden coffee spoon. A little bit of a story about this thing. There it is, kind of a fun little project. Coffee's on. Let's go ahead and get to work. Yesterday I filmed all morning building an exploding mousetrap box, kind of a gadget gimmick thing. And made it out of rough wood. You can kind of see it in the lower left-hand corner of the bench there while we're drawing out the pattern here. Well, I got in the house and sat down to do some editing and found out that I didn't have about 4 hours of video. Kind of depressing. I thought perhaps I'd go ahead and do an after-the-fact video, but I'll just go ahead and redo that whole thing. There's a simple layout with stuff you got laying around the shop. The purpose of this was really kind of to prove that the camera worked and that I had my settings correct again. And apparently I did. Nothing spectacular here, my standard pattern. I went ahead and left the ambient sound in the background for this one. A lot of times when I'm out in the studio, I have something going on in the background. Mindless TV show. A lot of times it's one of the Star Trek series because it's just kind of mindless and goes on. But for copyright issues, I was a little bit concerned. I have been getting some pretty good tool sounds in there. Sounds of the chisel, sound of the draw knife. So today I bit the bullet and worked the morning away without TV in the background. Here we're just setting the bowl in. Working in a circle. If you're going to figure out how to work with the grain. It's a pretty good example here. There's two parts on this. If you're standing behind the spoon there, 12 o'clock is away from me, 6 o'clock is towards me. The 3 and the 9 o'clock are the two problematic portions of the grain. Sounds like the clock is set on the hour, but in reality, that clock is hanging on the wall right behind the bench. It doesn't even have a movement in it. It simply has the gong set up in it. And when I whack the bench in the correct manner, the gong sounds. Probably need to move that somewhere else. It's an old antique clock that I haven't finished the restoration on. I'm going to go ahead and call this a coffee scoop for lack of a better reference, but it could be anything you wanted. It could be a dog food scoop. Depending on how big your dog is. Wouldn't work for my dog. We have to have a bucket to feed those monsters. The spoon gouge. I still have mixed feelings on this thing. It's kind of awkward. Got an idea for building one out of tool steel with a little different design. I think it'll work better, at least for my style. I just have more luck with the chisel. Refining the edges down here. I'm going to leave the tool marks in this one, so I'm taking extra care. Go ahead and let those tool marks show through. Hopefully you'll be able to see that in the video. The secret here to working with this problematic grain at the 3 and the 9 o'clock position is really how sharp your chisel is. If it's extremely sharp, it'll go ahead and cut across grain without tearing. Wasn't particularly worried about the marks in the side of the thing from the vise, because I'm going to carve most of that away. It gets round, so I can squeeze it pretty good. Throughout the video, I tried to speed it up. Nobody wants to watch me carve for an hour and a half on mindless things. If you're a beginning carver, hopefully you get kind of an idea. Switch back and forth the various different tools and gouges, whichever the grain tells me it needs. Trying to keep it symmetrical and round. Time to start defining the handle. This is video number 10 that I went ahead and put out, and people are subscribing, and a lot of you are watching these and getting a little bit of a following. I certainly do appreciate that. If you look in the lower right hand corner, go down in the description, either place, you can go ahead and click subscribe, and that would allow me to keep making these videos. And by all means, leave a comment. I do appreciate hearing what you have to say. This did start out as a test of the video over the camera, and then I kind of got into it. I was enjoying the way it looked. Too much material, time to take away part of the handle. I think I'll leave a big knob on the end here, and then just carve a huge bowl on the back. There, over to the bandsaw. Many of you will notice that I omitted all the sawing portions. Most of you can saw or run if you got a bandsaw, you know how to operate it. You don't need to watch me do that part. This got a big defect in the wood. The wood is basswood. Some of that basswood that I go ahead and cut down and have drying out in the shed. This is one of the last pieces. The snow's finally melted, and I go out to the shed and pick up some more pieces. I put a stop block, screwed it right into the bench for obvious reasons, something to push against here. Kind of an awkward little thing to hold. I'm not a big fan of bench clamp dogs and bench clamps, simply because the thing needs turn. And I'll go ahead and wrestle with it just a little bit. You can see it tries to win. Cutting that bad part out. A little bit of a shake in the tree there where it split. You can see that the water's gotten down in there and left a pretty good stain. Done with that stop block. Move it out of the way. Sorry about moving the camera around. Still experimenting with different angles and whatnot. Don't have the luxury of having about 6 cameras standing around the shop like a lot of folks do. Just drop that knife up, make sure it's razor sharp. You'll notice working in 2 directions, put a stop cut in there. If it starts to grab on the grain, obviously you're going in the wrong direction. You need to check that out and work the other direction. See, I lied to you earlier. There is TV going in the background. I'm just going to go ahead and leave that, turn it down a little bit. Starting to set in a little finer cuts. You notice when I do that, I kind of do a shaving lever kind of deal. if you watch other folks on how to carve and hold your knife, the one thing they don't recommend is what I'm doing right now, carving towards you. It seems to work out for me, and since my hands are in the video, you don't see too many scars on there. Defining that thing, making it round, you'll notice it's got an unround portion on the tip there. As you turn the piece around in your hand over and over again, take small pieces off and define that. At some point I'll notice that that back portion there has got a little bubble on it and fix that. Nothing harder in carving than to do a round shape and keep it round. All carving starts out being blocked out, if you will. That's the best way. Make sure your proportions are good. Get your blocks, little squares. If you've ever taken a drawing class, it's kind of the same concept. I have noticed that several of you are starting to watch these videos, and not too many people are leaving comments. Be kind of fun. See what you're thinking, where you'd like me to go, what you'd like to see me do. Various different things that I carve, pretty much anything that strikes my fancy at a given time. It is a hobby. And I'd be more than happy to create a video on something that you were interested in looking at. Down to the nitty-gritty here, I'm pretty happy with the shape of the thing, refining the top. If you watch the sword video, taking that goblin blood off of there, also known as blue Sharpie, and just trying to make it aesthetically pleasing. You've got a good feel in your hand when you leave the tool marks on there. If that's your desire, you can go ahead and sand this entire thing smooth. I'm not going to do that. I kind of like looking at the tool marks in there. You can see that it was actually hand carved. Most character in chip carving, it's not so much the subject matter as the fact that you're looking at something that's caricatured with planes, and the knives leave real nice sharp edges and planes. Your circuit modifications will be finished in 3 hours. Yes, Captain. If you're trying to get into carving or just interested in it, that knife I've got in my hand, probably your most valuable resource. There's a link for that down in the description. You can go ahead and pick that up from Amazon, as well as a nice beginner set of chisels. I'm using a couple of those in the video here. I still haven't removed a lot of the finish on them, and I haven't resharpened them. That's one of them right there. Some of the finishes off of it. Not real pleased with the razor sharpness of this. You'll notice I keep going back to this particular chisel. It's an antique one, and it has a really nice edge on it for what we're doing here. One of these days I'm going to sit down, pull all the chisels out, and do a sharpening video. Sharpening's not a whole lot of fun when you get it right. It's right. And if you hone those things quite often, they seem to stay pretty well sharp. Well, there it is. I was playing around with it, and I thought, well, you don't want to leave it upside down like this. laying on the counter. The concept is to have it out there. So I figured it needed a flat spot on the back. That's what we're going to do here. Take off what looks to be a flat, so it'll sit relatively level when it sits on your countertop. I did measure it. It looks to be just a little over, between 1/3 and 1/2 a cup. At some point, I'll show you, I have made in the past measuring spoons and measuring cups primarily for dry goods, and it's a matter of trial and error. You take that centerpiece, that's sitting pretty well on the bench there. You take it and keep carving out the scoop with a known quantity, like say a 1/2 cup or a cup or a teaspoon, and you keep measuring something simple like salt until the two measurements match and you've got an accurate one. There, seems to sit pretty well on the bench. I think we'll call that done. I love those tool marks in there. There's no question that somebody sat by a fire and carved this entire thing out by hand on a cold winter day. Hey, this has been with Studio on the Lake. Once again, in the lower right-hand corner, there's a subscribe button if you'll go ahead and subscribe. And leave me a comment. I do appreciate you watching.